Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Intellectual Intercourse. I'm Trana Winter.
And I'm Adam.
Did you have any dreams last night?
Oh my god, I didn't. Dreams don't come to me the day after. They usually come up multiple days later.
You'll remember a dream multiple days later, but not the morning after the dream?
Yeah, the dream comes to me more in a moment that's passing during the day, and I'm like, oh yeah, I dreamt about this, but it's never something that I remember the morning after.
Oh, I've never heard that before. I always remember it. Well, if I remember it at all,
hmm
it's the next morning and then it usually disappears and I don't remember it ever again. Or, I
Okay,
mean, some dreams are more memorable and,
sure.
and marking than others, but
What was the last dream you remember?
it wasn't last night, but it was a few nights ago. I had a dream about my most recent ex.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was kind of a bit sexual in nature, which is rare for me. I really don't have sex dreams. And not that this was a full-on sex dream. Again, I don't even really remember the details. I just
uh,
remember there was a kind of intimacy with
okay.
him in the dream. And then when I woke up, I kind of not missed him, but he was just on my mind for that morning.
Sure. I guess the dream, there's like a closeness or proximity and a warmth that when you wake up, there's an easy ability to kind of have that missing connection with somebody.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. It was a little unsettling.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in a bad way, but more just in a way of like, I'm like, we broke up months ago. Like, I was over it after 2 weeks. Like, why is this in my dream, you
Yeah.
know? But we don't need to unpack that today because today we're tackling a bigger question
Yes.
than that. And so I think we should just dive right in. Dear listeners, you know that every episode we ask each other a question, some bigger than others, some stupider than others. Today's question, I feel like I was avoiding. I don't even know if ready to answer the question myself today, but I'm going to start by asking it to you, Adam. What was the worst day of your life?
Unlike you, I've sort of had this calling to like answer this question. So it's something that I'm having the desire to unpack for a number of reasons. And I'm a little bit lost in where to start with it.
Mm,
So, what I would ask of you is to push me and provoke me.
okay, be careful
Uh,
what you ask for.
yeah. And I hope that it's going to be humorous at moments, but it is not a humorous story
Right.
or moment in my life. But there's some context around it that I just think that is interesting.
Why was there this sudden urgency around this experience all of a sudden?
The seasons are changing. The anniversary, I guess, of this date is around the corner. We've had our first snowfall, which like kind of connects it all together. So I think there's environmental factors and time factors that are making me think about it. And I've been on this journey of like just thinking about my childhood and care and relationships in my life and patterns that I've had. And I feel that this moment that happened in my life was quite traumatic, and I've never really had the space to process it. And I think that it's had elements that still influence my patterns today. And I've been
Mm,
dealing with those things, but not necessarily having processed this moment, which
okay.
happened. So I think that there's like a lot of things surrounding it.
Okay. Wow. I mean, I'm nervous.
Yeah.
Just because I want to be able to like hold your hand through it and be whatever you need me to be in this moment to talk about it because I
Yeah.
think that we've all had moments in our lives where we do have to reckon with something that maybe we've pushed away or swept under the rug because it's just too hard or whatever to deal with head on. But like you said, sometimes those things are often the things that have shaped us and are at the root of many of our patterns and feelings. So, what was the worst day of your life?
So it was December 4th, 2000. I was 15 years old. I was in grade nine. So, like I said, it was one of the biggest or like the first snowstorms that happened of the year. At the time, I was in Newfoundland. I was living with my parents, and a few years prior, our grandmother moved in with us. And her husband, my grandfather, who I didn't know that well, passed away. So we ended up all living together as a blended family to help take care of her. She was super healthy, very lucid. Like there was no, um, I guess, condition. It was just like to help her and to
For
be
her to
close
not
to her.
feel alone, maybe?
Exactly. And yeah, so it was like this December day, and we were at home. And my friend Cynthia came over. We were studying for a chemistry exam. So we were downstairs in the basement. What was really interesting about the home that we lived in is that it had an upstairs, and the downstairs was kind of like a complete apartment.
Okay.
So it had like its own kitchen and bathroom and bedrooms. So I ended up having like a computer room, study room in the basement, and it kind of felt like I had my own place to
Okay.
some extent. So it was
Like
really,
your own apartment? Felt like you were like a little grown up?
yeah, it was
Okay.
like very cool. Friends would come over, and it was like, oh yeah, we're going downstairs.
Okay, it's Adam's apartment.
Yeah. And so Cynthia is there. We're studying for this chemistry exam. And just for context, like I do not do numbers. I do not do chemistry. I do not do science.
Okay.
Like I love knowledge, but not that type of
Okay.
knowledge. Like it's just not my area. So already frustrated that I'm spending time to study for this exam.
Hmm.
And we just hit the 2000 mark. Fashion was really interesting. The technological meltdown that was supposed to happen
Yeah.
didn't happen. It was the end of the year and we all survived it. So it was this interesting moment in our youth.
Yeah.
And I can still remember the fashions that I had. We had one shop in my town in Newfoundland of like 3,000 people where I could buy clothes, and it was called Riffs.
Oh
And
my God. And did Riffs carry like brand names or like it was their in-house brand?
yeah, it's such an interesting backstory because later in life, like after moving to Quebec, I actually learned that Riffs is a Quebec company
Okay.
and they have about 10 to 15 stores scattered across Newfoundland in these really small communities. But
Is it like a
it's
department store, like a low-end department store?
completely so they basically go around Canada and buy all the things on liquidation that they can't sell in other
Right.
shops and then put it all in this shop. So I'm pulling all my fashion from the liquidation
I think
stuff.
I went to one this summer. I
Okay.
was in like up north Quebec, like Abitibi,
Uh-huh.
Rouyn-Noranda area. I think it might have been called Riffs. I don't remember, but it sounds like the exact kind of place that you're describing.
Yeah. So all of my fashions came from there or the Sears Canada catalog,
I loved the Sears catalog, especially the Christmas wish list edition.
which probably arrived at that time in that
Yeah.
moment. So and the hairstyles, it was like highlighted hair streaks,
Did you have
blonde. Oh, I
highlights,
did.
frosted tips?
Frosted tips. I had spikes, the
And
whole
what was your
thing.
clothing style like?
It was very sports, oversized. So it was a lot of Adidas, Nike. It,
Okay.
it was what I could find and
Yeah.
thrift. So we're just there studying for the exam, and my grandmother comes down the stairs and she's like, oh, I made some cookies to help with your studies. And that was so great. My parents weren't at home at the time. I honestly don't remember where they were, but they were out, and my grandmother was there. And she said, I'm going to go down to the store, which is a little convenience store, maybe 10 minutes away from our house. And she was said, I have to go check my lotto tickets. She was like an avid
Okay.
649 lotto ticket person.
I feel
Uh,
like I'm getting scared now.
yeah. So that was it. We were just there studying for the exam. We were eating cookies. Like it was a really great moment. And at some point, the phone started ringing. And at first, it was just a call that was like, oh, is your mother home? And I was like, oh, no, she's out right now. She'll be back later. Can she call you back? And then like I got another call shortly after that. I didn't think of anything about it at that moment. And then another one, and then another one, and then another one. So there was like six, seven calls in a row, like
Wait, you would answer the call and there was like, well, or you would,
people just asking for my mother or my
oh,
father, just like, are they home? Like
okay.
that's all that it was.
And you were just like, no, they're not home. And then
They're
you'd
not
hang up,
home.
but then another call would come from a different person.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it was like this serial phone call event that was happening over and over. And I started to get like, this is really weird. Why are my parents so in demand all of a sudden?
Right.
um, and I'd say by the 15th call, I was like,
15th.
yeah, I was getting very frustrated and I was questioning people, why are you looking for my
Yeah.
parents? What's going on? And they would say, oh, nothing, nothing. We'll call back later. Nobody wanted to give me a hint or give me information. And then at some point, I'd say by 20 calls, my aunt called me and she said, are your parents home? And I was like, no, they're not home. But the phone is ringing nonstop.
Mhm.
What is going on?
Yeah.
And she said, I really don't know what's going on. I'm trying to get information. I've heard that there was an accident and that maybe it was involving my grandmother and that I should not leave the house.
Okay.
And I was in a panic mode like, what's going on? This is not normal. What's going to happen? And like the phone just didn't stop. It was just this like siren that was going off in the background. Like
So even
everything was,
after your aunt called, people were still calling?
people were still
The
calling.
same people were the same people calling a second time? Do you remember?
I don't
Okay.
remember. I think some people did, but not everybody. And um, at some point, Cynthia was like, I think something is happening and it's better that I go home. And she's like, I can't really study in this situation anyways. Like,
Yeah.
there's something happening. And
So she left you alone?
yeah, she left me alone there.
Did you want her to stay?
Um, I was too big of a people pleaser. I was like, no, just stay and study. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Like just avoid the situation
Hmm.
and making sure that she was okay
Yeah.
versus giving space for me to have a reaction. Um, and at some point, I did go upstairs and I did look out the window, and around the corner, there was like flashing lights. There was an ambulance. I just didn't know what to do. I was kind of paralyzed in the moment.
Yeah.
I knew there was something that happened, and I just didn't know how to approach it. Like, who do I call? Like, my parents are not home. Um, my grandmother is not home. There's no cell phones. We don't text at this point. So I'm kind of just stranded in the house trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And um, at some point, I do get another phone call from my mother. And she was at the hospital. She was super calm. And her first request was that I just don't leave the house.
Okay.
And that my grandmother was crossing the street and was hit by a truck. And she was killed by the time that she got to the hospital. She had died. And it was like I was
Yeah.
just there alone in that moment and I had no idea how to process it
Yeah.
or what to do with it. And kind of just like having to deal with my own independence. It's something that we'll talk about a lot more on this episode. Having to raise myself or be very independent and self sufficient. It was a very pivotal moment of my life where I just had to do that again
Yeah.
or really be strong or even suppress it and put it aside because I didn't have the tools to understand it in that
Right.
moment. Um,
Were you close with your grandma?
yeah, I think there's some context that she's not even my grandmother. She's my step grandmother.
Okay.
So I was raised by my mother and my stepfather. And the grandmother I'm talking about is his
Okay.
mother. So it's this figure in my life that was a grandmother to me, but not biologically. And I think that there's a lot of complexity there because she loved me like her grandchild.
Yeah.
And that meant a lot to me as somebody that was merged into a blended family and
Yeah.
non traditional family archetypes. So I was very close to her, and it was really a weird moment for me to process that, like, somebody that I was so connected to had just disappeared instantly, like
Yeah.
from one moment to another.
And it like sounds like basically just outside your house.
Yeah,
Like she didn't even get very far.
no, not at all. So I was alone in the house, and my aunt comes into the house, and she was just sort of like asking me what was going on, where was my grandmother. And she took a back road. There's two ways that you could get to our house. Like there's two parallel roads. So she took a back road because it was basically
Right.
closed off where the accident had happened. And she's wondering where my grandmother is, what's going on. And I was like, I don't know how to tell you this, but like all of that is because she was hit
Hmm.
and she's at the hospital. You need to go to the hospital now. I didn't know how to tell her that I knew that she was dead.
Right.
I was just like, I think you just need to go to the hospital.
And your aunt was your stepfather's sister? Okay,
Exactly,
so it's
yes.
her mother.
Yeah. That's kind of the context of what happened. There was this big traumatic moment that I guess hit my life very quickly.
Hmm.
And it sort of had these really big ramifications of how I processed certain things later and patterns that I've noticed that have showed up. So I don't know. Do you have questions about that before we dive into the second part of that?
Well, no, I mean, that is my question. Like,
Yeah.
how did it change you and your life? Like, what were those ramifications?
Yeah. Um, I guess the big one is I was passed around quite a bit as a child, even up into my teen years.
And when you say passed around, you mean you were looked after by other
Yeah,
people?
yeah,
Like, because your
exactly.
mom was working,
Y-
or
Yeah, so my mother was still studying when she had me. She had me quite young. She was still figuring out her career and how to provide for me. So I was often like taken care of by my grandparents, her parents, by my aunts, by cousins or distant relatives. Like it was a community that raised me. And I really believe that my mother and all of those people did the best that they
Mhm.
could and they did an amazing job. And I think with that came with them providing for me and not overtly caring for me. Like they had their own lives,
Right.
and I was just somebody that was being uh, taken care of, and they were providing shelter and food, but I never felt the level of care that I needed in that
Yeah.
moment. I think that was really important. And
Like,
when,
did you feel like you didn't have, like, a home base?
yeah, I didn't feel like I had an anchor. I guess, like, also as a queer person, I think growing up, I just had such different interest and drive and motivations than anybody that I saw around me that
Right.
I just felt often really alienated
Mm.
or I scared people. Like they just didn't know
What to
how
do
to,
with you,
yeah,
or how to talk, how to engage with you.
exactly. Like I always felt this really strong otheredness
Yeah.
completely. And
Me too, I felt that a lot growing up.
yeah,
Even though my family and, like well, my immediate family, I didn't feel that with, but with my extended family, I would feel that way, that anytime there was, like, a big family gathering, I would always feel really out of place, even though I knew that I was loved and genuinely accepted.
hmm,
I just yeah, felt like such an outsider, and I couldn't relate.
yeah,
Exactly what you're describing, like, I just knew that I don't know, my world was just different. It's a really affecting experience,
hmm,
that isolation that sometimes maybe we minimize. Sometimes maybe we do kind of say, "Oh, well, all queer people went through that." So we
right,
kind of brush it aside a little bit. But I think when you consider yourself from what, 3, 4, 5 years old up until you graduate high school and you're constantly feeling this alienation, that must take a toll. And I'm sure that we're still affected by living so many years with that feeling of being the other or being alien.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we're probably still dealing with it
For
today.
sure. I still shut down at
Yeah,
family gatherings.
yeah,
I still feel out of place at a big family gathering. And again, it's not because I'm not loved or accepted. It's just, I just feel so far removed
yeah,
that, and I don't even make the effort to share myself because I kind of just make this assumption that like they won't get it.
yeah.
And I don't mean that in a mean way at all. I think that my existence or my life is just not part of their frame of reference.
Hmm.
And I often don't feel like having to explain
Yeah,
things.
I get it. And I think that's probably why this relationship with my grandmother was so significant to me that,
Why did
um,
you feel like she saw you?
yeah, I guess like as a child that was passed around, I know that my grandparents and the other people that took care of me did love me and did want me to be there. And I'm not diminishing
Yeah.
that, but I always felt that from the first moment that I met my grandmother that passed away, there was just curiosity about her towards me and that
Mm,
she wanted and looked forward to spend time with me.
yeah.
And also was a person that was creative and crafty and always making things, whether it was
Mm,
like knitting sweaters or doing quilts. She was the queen of decorating a Christmas tree. Everybody came to see her Christmas tree because of how much effort she put into decorating it. So there was like these affinities of a creative seeing another creative
yeah.
and her just being excited by me
Hmm.
and wanting to genuinely spend time with me. And over the years, she could not wait to wake up with me Christmas morning and to open gifts. And she would come tuck me in at night. And there was just like this softness and just a simple gesture of the last moment she did for me was to bake cookies. Like
Yeah.
there's just like these really beautiful moments that I don't know if I got from other people in the same way. Like
Yeah.
only she could do it.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, I also have to say this for my stepfather that loved me like their own child or their
Yeah.
own family. And that that's so significant to me. It taught me chosen family from a very early moment in my
Yeah.
life, probably before I even realized the significance of it.
For sure.
And yeah, I think that losing her that way, it was just such a shock to my system. I don't know sometimes that if I could ever find that type of connection or,
Be loved in that way ever again.
yeah. And I think that when you lose somebody that's close to you, um, the age or deterioration of health or they become sick and you're able to sort of process the loss of somebody over
Yeah.
time, um, it's very different than going from one moment to the next where you couldn't imagine your life without this person and then they're just suddenly not there.
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody processes that trauma. Like, I think you know this, like my obsession with cookies.
Yes.
I was talking with my therapist a couple years ago and I gave a very short version of this story to give her context of like important moments in my
Yeah.
life. And she was like, Adam, stop. She's like, where do you think that your connection to cookies come from? And I
Hmm.
was like, I don't know. And she's like, it's right here. You stress eat cookies to feel comfort and care. And it's like connected to this moment and this person that provided it for you. So I think there's like a kind of a funny and cute thing that like
Yeah.
my biggest weakness in life is cookies and there's no limit to how many I can eat. And whenever I'm stressed, I just want that warmth because I think it connects me to her.
Yeah.
And I don't know
But is that
why.
a bad thing?
No, I think it's
No,
an
I don't think
amazing
that,
thing.
yeah. I'm like, I think there's kind of something beautiful about that there is something, even if it seems as insignificant as a cookie, but just that there is something that connects you
Yeah.
to that love,
Yeah.
that there is still an access point.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and I don't know why, like this year feels different. Like I feel her closer. I don't like I'm not as spiritual like that she's still living somewhere in an afterlife or anything like that, but
I mean,
ah,
maybe that's too big of a question, but like, you don't really believe in an afterlife or
not really. I mean, I think that we are energy and we disperse into energy and we transform into other forms of energy. But
yeah,
like her as an entity,
right,
it's not like she has another form and another life,
right.
but she dispersed and parts of her are
Hmm.
everywhere. And but I guess I do believe that she's a part of me in some
Yeah,
ways.
she is. I
And
don't even think there's like anything unclear about that. I mean,
yeah,
I mean, at the very least, the love that she had for you and that you had for her is still obviously within you.
hmm,
Like that love, even if the person goes away, I don't believe that the love goes away.
yeah. And usually like the anniversary, the December 4th comes up and I'm surprised when I realize that it's the 4th, or
Right.
my mother will send me a quick message. We always say, "Oh, it's been another year." It really became a moment where we just stopped our lives. Like we
Yeah.
didn't celebrate Christmas. We just were in mourning
Yeah.
because we were in shock. And this year I just feel close to her in this really strange way. And I
In a
think that I'm,
positive way?
yeah,
Or
I think that I'm just closer to my emotions and I'm able to feel it more or process it more. And that makes me feel closer to her.
what do you think is the aspect of this experience or story that you weren't confronting? Like, what is the part of this story that, because when we first started this conversation, you mentioned that there was this feeling of something from your past that you hadn't reconciled with or really acknowledged, in particular with the way that it manifests itself in your current behaviors. So, like, what is that part of the experience that you've been ignoring for a long time that maybe you're starting to look at now?
I think the big part of it is tied to this idea that I think people just disappear,
Mm,
or that I am able to cut people out of my life so abruptly, and it's almost that they don't exist to me anymore. And it's kind of this pattern that I've learned through that moment. Like, I can step back that my biological father was not there for my birth. Like, it was already just disappeared from my
hmm.
life. And then my grandmother passing away this way so quickly, just basically she evaporated
Yeah.
in some form. And I think that I also believe, or like when relationships or things don't go well for me, I just like they just end really harshly. Like it's not like I'm being harsh, but like once I've decided that it's over or they've decided that it's over,
It's over.
it's like,
The door is closed.
yeah,
It's
it's like
done. It
all
evaporates.
all of my exes or like significant people that the relationships never continued. I don't know where they are. I
And you
don't
don't
know.
care. Or do you?
I don't know. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Once you're in my world, you're in it, but once you cross the line, you're out of it. There's no in between.
It's so interesting because, listeners, I'm going to let you in on a behind the scenes thing. Um, Adam and I, before we start our conversation, we choose a song, or one of us will choose a song that we listen to sort of set the mood or just to open up the emotional channels. And today, very instinctively, without any real reflection, I chose Madonna's song "Gone." And it's just like there are lyrics in that song that are making me, well, the things that you're saying are making me think of some of those lyrics, like I'll be gone before it happens. And this idea of like vanishing or just being gone. Um, but I guess my question is, so like let's just use the example, not even of a specific relationship, but just like a romantic relationship in general. When you
Hmm.
hypothetically reach this moment where, I don't know, a line has been crossed or it's just not working for you anymore,
Hmm.
when you make that decision to peace out, so there's sort of two things happening. You're cutting that person out of your life and you're removing yourself from their life.
Yeah.
And once you've removed yourself from their life, you like it's a clean break. Like there's no
There's,
more room for any further discussion. Like that decision has been made, the action has been taken. So I guess my question is, you're bringing this up.
mhm,
Is it because you're starting to doubt the not the validity, because of all choices are valid,
mhm,
but are you thinking that maybe there's something cold or callous about that you're re-examining? Like, are you asking yourself, why do you do that? Because you think there's something quote unquote wrong with it, just
mhm.
for lack of a better word?
I th
Or do you see your ability to do that, to make these clean breaks as a positive thing? Because if this can provide some sort of context, like I'm the opposite of you.
Mhm,
I will really, it's very hard for me to let go of things or people, even if a relationship is not working.
mhm,
Like I'll never, or extremely rarely, will I be the one to make that clean break,
mhm.
even if sometimes I need to. It's really hard for me. I guess also, and I mean, it also depends on the relationship too, but I think especially when it comes to long-term relationships, and I'm not just talking romantically, but like friendships, if I've had a friend for years and years and years, or like family that I've had in my life for years and years and years, it's hard for me to imagine ending those relationships, even if, let's just say hypothetically, I needed to. Like I'm the opposite of you. Like I can't. I feel like even if I do, I the door is always open a crack.
I wish that I was a bit softer in that
Yeah.
decision making. I unilaterally just decide and then suddenly I'm not accessible and the
Yeah.
other person has to deal with that emotion on their own and I have to deal with it on my own and there's no healing moment that
Yeah.
happens together and I never ever get those connections to sort of heal. So they're wounds that are kind of just left there and not
But do you
processed.
have wounds that were left unprocessed because of that? Or did you wound people and then just peace out?
Probably both. Like I assume that the cutting out or the immediate break is closure, but I don't know if it really
Yeah.
is. It's more just like suppression, put it aside in a box.
Yeah. Because I remember years ago when one of your relationships ended,
Hmm.
and I was friendly with your ex through you. Like I didn't have a one-on-one friendship with them, but I would hang out with them alongside you, so I got to know them. Um, and then you guys broke up, and if memory serves me correctly, I think he even DM'd me
Hmm.
to be like, Adam won't speak to me.
Yeah.
And I know that you also told me that, like, at one point he even called your mom because this breakup happened between the two of you. Obviously, there were wounds, obviously, there were emotions. He was probably trying to achieve some kind of closure and needed you for that process.
Yeah.
And you would not respond. And I remember you telling me, like, I don't have anything left to say to him.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking in that moment, like, oh, fuck. Like, Adam's, there's something
Yeah.
that
It's
I'm not used to. Like I remember, it's not that I was like frightened by that, but I just remember thinking at that time, like, oh, I've never met anyone that's been able to take that approach or
hmm.
to feel that way. And again, not in a judgmental way, just in a like, oh my God kind of way. And then also, I mean, in full transparency, a couple of years after that, like you cut me out too. Like, which we'll talk about on a future episode in more detail, but like Yeah, but I remember at that point in our friendship, it was a different situation though, because even I felt our friendship needed to end at that time. So there was a part of me that was even grateful that you just did it because, again, I don't think that I ever would have been able to.
Hmm.
I think I would have just continued within like the toxicity of that era in our friendship. Like I would never have been able to cut you out.
Yeah.
So there was a part of me that was grateful. But yeah, I guess, yeah. Are you reckoning with this side of yourself that has the ability to make these clean breaks?
Yeah, I think that like I'm becoming more present to it, and I think I've matured quite a bit since those previous examples, and um, I have more of the communication skills to like softly do it or like allow a bit more of a space overlap between the other person and myself. But I'm not like going around every day cutting people out of my
No,
life
I
either.
know, I know, I know.
But I guess like that's one element, but probably the biggest element of this whole event or this worst day is recognizing like the loss of care. Like that's the hardest thing for me to process. Like,
Because no one has ever cared for you in that way since.
yeah.
Are you able to accept the idea that each kind of love experience is unique? And so you will never have that again? And maybe that's okay? Because I think even to get that kind of love once
Hmm.
is an enormous gift.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I think I do accept it. And I know that like I have a lot of love in my life, like between friendships, my partner. There's a lot of love, and I feel really connected to that. And I wish that I could express it more.
mm.
And I think that's something that I'm working on.
That's interesting because I mean, like, obviously you're one of the most important people in my life,
Hmm.
but, and there are times where, like, I just want to tell you I love you,
Hmm.
but I feel like I can't because I feel like it would make you uncomfortable because you're not the type of person to, even though I know you love me,
Hmm.
like, I don't want to put you in a position where you have to say it back because I feel like I know that would make you uncomfortable. Whereas, like, in other friendships that I have, like, I say I love you at the end of like every conversation that I have with them.
Hmm. I have love for you too. And I love when I feel emotions, and it's an invitation to be more connected to that side of myself.
Yeah.
I'm also reflecting on ways that I've just blocked care in my life
Yeah.
too.
Maybe you don't let people care for you.
Yeah. And there's like that whole element of being tied into this, like losing somebody that cared for me in a way that was really important and significant for me, and then never having it again. And then also thinking of my independence and
Yeah.
survival modes. And I probably put these barriers of I better learn how to care for myself and be independent than to expect that it's coming from elsewhere.
Yeah. I've learned the same lesson.
Hmm.
100%. Um, yeah, to the point where that level of hyper independence harms you. I used to joke about it in my Alanis show. Like, I used to talk about how I built so many walls around myself to protect myself and to be independent, like an independent fortress,
Hmm.
basically. But I didn't realize in the process that I had like walled myself in,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like couldn't get out. Like I trapped myself because I do think that the independence and self protection born out of a trauma response
Sure.
is rarely healthy because it tends to take on such an extreme that we don't allow ourselves to be cared for. We don't
Hmm.
allow the love fully in sometimes. Ironically, like, despite these things and like, despite maybe your inability to be more affectionate or
Hmm.
open with your love, like, I feel so protected by you.
Hmm.
Like, I feel so safe having you in my life.
Hmm.
And it's weird because I really thought we would never be friends again, and I was really at peace with that.
Yeah.
But like since we reconnected in the pandemic and I think we've become close again, yeah, I feel and like there was a part of me that's been wanting to tell you that for whatever reason, but I'm like, but I don't want Adam to think that like I expect that care. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to add more, I don't want to add a sense of obligation, but like you make me feel really safe.
We had that moment where we basically didn't talk for a significant amount of time,
Yeah.
and we've reconnected, and I think we both arrived back ready to work through whatever it was and then also create something new.
Yeah.
And that's not something that I ever did before. And it's a great
Yes.
learning experience for me. And I think that it comes down to like there's a really weird line or wall around me where you're inside of it or you're not inside
Yeah.
of it. And when you're on the outside, you see it. And
Right.
when you're on the inside, you're like, this is fragile
Yeah.
or important. And if I'm here, it really means something significant to me.
Right.
And there's almost also a fear of like, well, could I go outside of that wall or that line? And it
Yeah.
makes, I think, people that are really close to me scared.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, I mean, I do feel very solid in our connection and our friendship. Like, I mean, obviously, I don't know the future, but I think that in general, I'm someone that definitely, and maybe that's why I provided to others this idea that, like, I'm not going to abandon you.
Hmm.
Like, I will, in any relationship that means something to me, I will go through all the discomfort and all the pain if it's necessary to get to the other side of it. Like,
Sure.
I will not just, you know,
Yeah.
like make that clean break. And I'm not saying that with any judgment towards you. I'm just saying that, like, I guess, yeah, in general, like, I kind of need to feel that the people that I really love are not going to abandon me,
Yeah.
you know?
We both have that, I
Yeah.
think. And my response or my approach to it is much more aggressive on the other side of like, I'm going to abandon you first and I'm going to completely
Yeah.
cut you out so that it can never happen.
Exactly. So should I be scared?
Well, a question that I have for you is how do you think this moment has shaped me?
Well, I've noticed that you're not the most affectionate person. Even when you give hugs, like you don't really give amazing hugs. um there's yeah, I think that I've noticed a reluctance on your part to expressing love and affection.
Mhm.
I think that's why it was so interesting to do mushrooms with you because I saw another side of you
Mhm.
that I guess on some level I know is there. So that's why I think like maybe the lack of demonstrative affection doesn't really affect me because I feel like I know that it's in you and
Uh-huh.
I believe in it and I still see it. Um, but yeah, I can sense you're holding something back sometimes when it comes to engaging in like love.
Yeah.
And not romantic related, but like all love.
Right.
Just love the big umbrella term,
Mhm.
you know?
And what do you think is my pathway forward?
Well, also, I mean, I'm going to try to answer your question.
Mhm.
But I guess more broadly first, people express love in different ways. Like, I mean, we know about the idea of love languages and how sometimes you may be in a relationship with someone, friendship or otherwise, where you don't speak the same love languages. Like, to me, that's
Mhm.
not necessarily a deal breaker. It just makes things sometimes a little bit harder. Or sometimes if you're in relationship with someone who has a different love language than you, it's being conscious of sometimes just trying to make the effort to speak their language and for that
Mhm.
person in turn to speak yours.
Sure.
Um, but also, how much can a person change?
Yeah.
And maybe that's a bigger question for another episode. Maybe this is a stupid example. We all know that I'm like obsessed with women in pop. And like when I look at someone like Barbara Streisand, for example, who grew up with a major lack of affection in her childhood, like she was not well loved by her mom. She had an awful stepfather. Like she really grew up in a very cold and
Hmm.
emotionally barren environment.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you expect this woman to be warm and cuddly?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which she's not. She's very cold, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't love.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean that she doesn't love deeply. It just means that like she's not going to take you in her arms,
Yeah.
but she's going to do other things. And aren't those other things still valid? I guess what I'm trying to say in response to your question is like maybe there's not something you necessarily need to do differently. I don't know. I think that that's something that only you can decide for you. If you feel like the way that you currently express love is not enough, or it's not allowing you to in turn receive what you need,
Hmm.
then yeah, maybe there is a change that needs to be made.
I feel like there's a change that needs to be made because I feel the emotions and I feel the love inside me. And like, even when I thought that I would do this episode, I thought that I would be much more emotional about it. And it wasn't that I didn't have the emotions inside me, but I'm able to limit or just like not let them get past the throat or into the head. It's like I feel them in my body, but they're
So
just trapped.
so can you name them? Those things that you thought you might allow to come out that haven't yet?
I don't know if there's like this energy or charge inside me that's almost like magnets pulling and pushing inside me that are very charged and energetic. And it's like,
What do you feel like you need? Like, do you need a big cry and it's not coming?
no, it's more like an orgasm that never comes. It's like
Okay.
you kind of like get to this moment and like you feel like you're about to orgasm and then the moment is gone.
And were
Like,
you hoping that this conversation would provoke that release?
no, I think it's more just a space for me to talk about this traumatic event that happened that I think that I'm much more emotional about today, but still I feel blocked. It's like the
And you can't envision how to let them out. You don't know. You don't have a clue of how you can do that.
I guess I don't know if words are the way that I would express the emotion. It's like it,
So, what are like, are there ideas that you have for alternatives that could
I
potentially
guess
allow you to?
improving my hugs to
Yeah,
start.
okay, yeah.
um, I prefer written word. Like maybe I
Okay,
should really take the time
yeah.
to write to people or like express my emotion that way. I mean, I think I've turned to art in the past. Like my work is often has like this really strong longing or
Yeah.
connection to other people or even to myself. It's always been this mirror.
But let's just say you were to somehow achieve this emotional orgasm that has eluded you.
Yes.
What do you think it would change? Like, or what's your fantasy or hope that would change as a result of this release that you seem incapable of having right now?
I think it probably comes back to the alienation component and the elements that you talked about. You know that I care and love, but I don't necessarily exude it.
Mm.
And I think that like my partner Mark would say the same thing. I
Mhm.
think my mother, like all of these people around me would say the same. And it makes me really sad because there's so much love. Why is it lost in translation or it just doesn't reach the person?
Yeah.
And it's such a missed opportunity for me to feel the closeness that I just wanted my whole life. And
But it's there, Adam. Like, it's so in your grasp.
I know.
Like, just go for it. Just let yourself love.
I do, but whenever it reaches the surface, it's like that moment just disappears so quickly that I just want to be able to hold onto it and like, amplify it and like a laser pointed at the people that I care the most.
Mhm.
And I just haven't found that tool that lets me do that yet.
But I have confidence that you'll find it.
Yeah.
And I wish it for you. I do because I mean, what else is there in this life?
Yeah.
Like that love that you had with your grandma, like that level of love,
Hmm.
like it's like the greatest thing. I'll
So,
just add one thing that's kind
sure.
of ironic, and maybe, I mean, I don't even know if I want to say it out loud, but it's just interesting that this is what your story was about because I didn't know what your answer to this question would be today. I just know that in the conversations that we had, you really wanted to address this subject. And the reason that I didn't want to address this subject is because I know that for me, the worst day of my life hasn't happened yet because it will be when my grandmother
Okay.
passes.
Yeah.
I know that that's going to be the worst day, and it is the worst day of yours,
Yeah.
you know?
There's something so special, I think, to a queer, non-conforming child, the relationship with the grandparent and
Yeah.
especially the grandmother.
If
It's,
you're lucky enough to have a good one,
yeah.
not everyone does.
Yeah.
I grew up with so many friends that didn't have close relationships with their grandparents.
Hmm.
I just assumed everyone had an amazing grandma,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and I think that we have similar moments or overlap of like what our childhood felt like for us,
Yeah.
and turning to somebody that isn't like your primary caregiver is, at least for me, being an only child, it was
Hmm.
really important for me.
Yeah. I already know that I'm never gonna be loved in the same way.
Yeah.
That's why hearing you say that, like, I know.
Hmm.
But maybe it's okay. Those kinds of love, maybe that's the kind of love that only a grandma can give.
So thanks for listening to me. I really appreciate letting me have this space to sort of unpack some of this, which I'm still working through.
Yeah.
Um, Go out and love your people. If you are stuck in expressing your emotions, be patient with yourself. Like, it's something that I'm working on, and I just can't find the connection. Like, I can't find the radio station,
Yeah.
but I know that the radio station is there.
Yes, that's such a perfect metaphor.
And I can't wait to be in tune with
I
it.
I'm so excited. I'm like, "Oh my god, maybe there's like a love flood that's like
Yeah.
about to hit all of us."
Yes.
Thank you, Adam. We'll see you on the next episode.
Take care.
Don't leave us unsatisfied. Subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and share the podcast with someone curious enough to listen.
Join us on Instagram at Gotta Be Deep for more questions without answers.
Special thanks to Farron Isles for our theme song, Wipe My Memory Clean.